It really is a tough one. We're going to be trying to make sense of the lives and deaths of two people, Imaan Syms and Abdullah Boonzaaier.
And we're going to be relying on news reports and accounts to piece together what happened.
Yeah, it's all about the sources, right? We're going to stick with what's been reported and see if we can make sense of this really complex and tragic situation. It really highlights how devastating gang violence can be, not just for those directly involved, but for the whole community.
Absolutely. So to give you a quick overview, Imaan Syms was the pregnant girlfriend of Abdullah Boonzaaier. Abdullah was he was a big name in the Cape Town underworld, a gang leader who was killed back in 2022.
Right, and the truly disturbing part is that Imaan was also murdered almost 3 years later in 2025.
That gap between their deaths, but the clear link between them, that's what we're going to try to untangle.
Yeah, we're going beyond just the timeline here. We want to understand the human cost, the why, the motivations, and the questions that still linger, all based on the information available to us.
Okay, so let's start with their relationship. What do the reports say about Imaan and Abdullah?
By all accounts, it was a long-term relationship, and Imaan was incredibly loyal to Abdullah. Reports suggest she stood by him through thick and thin, you know.
That's powerful, especially considering the life Abdullah led. We need to talk about his background.
Absolutely. He wasn't just any gang leader. Abdullah's father was Rashid Staggy.
Staggy, of the Hard Livings gang. That's Staggy.
The one and only. So you can see Abdullah had deep roots in that world. But he didn't just follow his father's footsteps. He carved his own path, first with a group called the Terrible HLs.
The Terrible HL.
Yeah, it was a splinter group, you could say. And then he went on to lead the Fancy Boys.
So this tells us he was ambitious, creating his own power base.
Exactly. And it speaks volumes about the ever-changing dynamics within gangs. It's a world of constant competition, with new power structures emerging all the time.
And in the middle of this chaotic world, you have Imaan. The reports described her as Abdullah's anchor, someone who provided stability in his life.
It makes you think, in such a dangerous, volatile world, having those close personal bonds, that kind of support, must have been crucial. But tragically, those very connections can also become a source of vulnerability when things go wrong.
And things went very wrong on September 17th, 2022. The reports about Abdullah's death are pretty chilling.
They are. It happened at a place called The Box in Mannenberg. Have you heard of it?
I haven't, but the reports describe it as a gambling spot, right?
Yeah, a central gambling spot in Mannenberg, an area notorious for its gang activity. Those kinds of places, they become hubs for rivalries. Tensions run high, and someone like Abdullah, a gang leader, would be a prime target.
Out in the open, everyone knowing who he is, and the way he died. The report says at least 10 shots to the face and upper body. That's not just violence, that's an execution.
Absolutely. The sheer number of shots tells you everything you need to know about the intent. They wanted to make sure he was gone, no question. And doing it in such a public place like The Box, it's a statement, a message to everyone, rivals and the community alike.
It's brutal. And one detail that really stuck with me was the mention of a woman believed to be Imaan kneeling by his body right after the shooting.
I know. Can you imagine being in that moment? The shock, the grief, the sudden violent loss, it brings home the human cost of this violence. These aren't just names in news reports. They are real people with families, with loved ones.
And Dazal's death created a void.
Of course. A power vacuum at the top of his gang, which almost guarantees more instability and conflict.
Which leads us to Imaan. Even though she wasn't directly involved in Abdullah's criminal activities, she was still considered vulnerable. Why is that?
Well, we have to understand how gangs operate. Loyalty is paramount. Revenge is a driving force. And settling scores, it's like an unwritten rule.
Unfinished business, as they say.
Exactly. And Imaan was so close to Abdullah. Some may have seen her as holding information, maybe still having connections, or even simply representing his legacy. Any of those things could make her a target.
And there were rumors, right? After Abdullah's death, people questioned what Imaan might have known, whether she was still involved somehow, even whether her death years later was connected to something Abdullah did.
It highlights a terrifying truth. In that world, being close to someone, even just knowing something, can put you in danger. You become guilty by association. The reports are very clear in stating that Imaan was considered marked.
Marked. It's a chilling word.
It is. It means you're a target. It doesn't matter if you're actively involved or not. It's about the potential threat you represent, or even just the opportunity you present to someone looking to send a message.
And that brings us to March 10th, 2025. The details of Imaan's death are just horrifying.
It was a brutal attack.
Sussex Street in Woodstock, late at night. An unidentified gunman fires at least 17 bullets. Imaan died right there on the street.
Again, the number of bullets is a clear indicator of intent. Like with Abdullah, it was meant to be a sure thing, no chance of survival. And again, in a public place, to show force, a blatant disregard for the law.
But the real gut punch is that Imaan was pregnant. She was carrying a child. It's a double loss, a future stolen.
It adds a whole other layer of tragedy. It's not just one life, but two. The reports call it a cold, calculated, and brutal execution, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. It's hard to find the words for how cruel it is, taking the life of an expectant mother.
The news reports say Cape Town was stunned. Imaan wasn't just some anonymous figure. People knew her, cared about her.
And her father, Ziad Williams, he was a respected member of the minstrel fraternity.
The minstrels, that's a big deal in Cape Town, right?
Huge. It's a cornerstone of their culture. So Imaan had connections, a place in the wider community totally separate from Abdullah and the game world.
It shows how this violence touches everyone, how far the ripples spread.
Exactly. And if you look at social media, the tributes that poured in for Imaan paint a picture of someone kind, loving, well-liked. It's such a contrast to the violence of her death.
A reminder that behind the headlines, behind the labels, there are real people with real lives.
Absolutely. And amidst all the grief and tributes, the big questions remain unanswered. Why was Imaan killed? Was it revenge for something Abdullah did? Who gave the order? Will anyone ever be held accountable?
Will there be justice? Doesn't seem likely. But there's another layer to this, isn't there? It feels like violence in this world begets more violence. The reports talk about the fear of retaliation after Imaan's murder, this endless cycle of tit for tat. It's like a disease, this code of revenge that turns personal loss into a community crisis. And even those not directly involved can get caught in the crossfire.
That's the tragic reality of it. One act of violence leads to another and another and another. Fear takes over. No one feels safe and the lines get blurred. Anyone can become a target, whether they're actively involved or not.
And the news is pretty clear about how hard it is to get justice in these cases. Neither Abdullah's nor Imaan's killers have been caught.
It's a recurring problem. People are terrified to come forward to testify. The fear of reprisal is just too great. Plus, these gangs, they operate in secrecy, making it incredibly difficult to investigate, let alone get convictions.
So the cycle continues. The reports call this a grim reminder of the ongoing gang wars and their impact. It's hard to disagree.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost. Lives cut short, families shattered, and a whole community living under the shadow of fear.
The news describes their story as a tragic love story that was ultimately destroyed by violence. They spent years together, loved each other, supported each other. Then Abdullah is murdered, leaving Imaan to grieve. And finally, she meets the same fate. It's heartbreaking.
And even though they were killed years apart in different places, their fates are intertwined. It's like a cruel twist of fate. Their shared life led to a shared tragedy.
And now their names are added to what the news calls the long list of victims in Cape Town's gang wars. Their love story, as they say, forever stained with blood. It's a powerful image and a terribly sad one.
It speaks to the lasting legacy of violence. Not just the immediate loss, but how it seeps into the fabric of a community, how it becomes part of the story, a stain that never truly fades.
The police say they're investigating Imaan's murder, but the reports are careful to point out how hard it is to solve these kinds of cases. They even suggest that, like Abdullah's murder, this one may remain unsolved.
That's the frustrating part. There's a sense that these crimes often go unpunished, which only adds to the feeling of hopelessness and perpetuates the cycle. It's a massive challenge for law enforcement, trying to break through the silence, the fear, the code of secrecy.
And the final thought from the reports is a chilling one. This cycle of violence will likely continue. More lives will be lost, more families will grieve. It feels like a never-ending tragedy.
It's a sobering thought. Until the root causes of this violence are addressed, until there's a real change in the conditions that allow it to thrive, it's hard to see how the cycle will be broken.
This has been a difficult deep dive, facing the reality of these lost lives and the brutal nature of gang violence. It's heavy stuff.
It really is. It's a stark reminder that violence affects everyone, not just the victims themselves, but their loved ones, their community. Imaan's story shows us that even those who aren't directly involved can be caught in the crossfire.
So this is the question we leave you with, and it's not an easy one. What can be done when the cycle of violence seems unbreakable? How can we as a society confront this problem and address the terrible human cost? It's a question we all need to grapple with, not just in Cape Town, but anywhere where this kind of violence takes hold.
It's a challenge that demands our attention, our compassion, and our commitment to finding solutions. We can't just turn away from these stories.
We can't forget Imaan and Abdullah. Their stories are a reminder of the urgency, the need to find a better way.
It's a call to action for all of us.